Welcome to episode 58 of Rubbish Talk with myself, Alistair Meldrum.
And myself, Jane Bond.
And we're both still a bit croaky, Jane, aren't we?
We are still a bit coffee.
No.
I can practice if you like. But
Last episode, I think we subjected enough people to our coughing and spluttering. Hopefully we're slightly better than we were last time. Hopefully.
I hope, because by the time this episode goes out, I'll be sunning myself in Dubai. Didn't want to, just saying.
I did think we called it the lurgy last time, and I was thinking there might be people that don't know what the lurgy is, but the lurgy is I think it's a Scottish expression for a cold. I don't know if other countries use it, but we certainly do. Anyway, enough about us. So this week we have Richard Coulson, who is the chair of the Wood Recyclers Association. So more about that later. But first of all, any news, Jane?
Well, yes. Of course, we've always got news. So the first one, we actually had it sent through to us on might have been our hello at Rubbish Talk email. Somebody suggested this was a good one to look at, and scientists create new methods to recycle lithium batteries using vegetable oil. So apparently the University of Leicester has been doing some, quite interesting studies on trying to take out the metal oxides from the batteries. And they found that if they use water and vegetable, I'm sure there's a bit more to just chucking water and vegetable oil in a battery, but the technique purifies a lithium-ion battery black mass and other materials, and it directly within minutes at room temperature. Now, that's quite technical for me, but I'm sure that's a good thing. It sounds like a good thing.
Oh, it's incredible if they have done that, because the process to get black mass is really, it's quite a dangerous material to, potentially it's explosive, it's a dust, all these things. So the normal process is quite complex to control that hazard. So if they can do it by putting in water and vegetable oil, I can imagine it's a bit of a game changer.
Yeah, because
the
black mass has got carbon graphite, lithium, nickel, and cobalt metal oxides as well, and they get oil nano droplets, stick to the surface of the carbon, and pull them out.
There was someone else I spotted about batteries, and what they worked out was using recycled black mass actually made a better battery than the virgin battery for some reason. I've no clue why, but that was the thing. But I think this goes back to I've had a wee rant about this before, that we put loads and loads of research into building better and better batteries. Maybe what we're needing to do is put loads and loads of research into how to actually recycle and recover the precious metals of these. So, as always, we'll put the link up if anybody is interested. So, there you go. I noticed the other one, Fife Council, I've just announced a collection system for batteries. So you're allowed to put your batteries on top of I think it was on top of your residual bin, and they'll collect them. What I did notice that they were very prescriptive over the batteries they could and couldn't take. So it was like your AA's, your AAA's, your 9-volt batteries and so on. And then they had a list of things they couldn't take, like vapes and phone batteries and battery banks and stuff like that. But my only suspicion, I think it's a great idea, but my suspicion is good luck to them getting the batteries they want.
Do they give them something
they'll end up just getting any battery.
Yeah, do they give them something to put
I think
them
you've just to put them in a plastic bag.
Oh, right.
I think you just put them in a plastic bag and put them on top of your bin. And then obviously the bin lorry's got a collection system. So
that's quite cool. So have you been watching the telly, Alistair?
Toxic Town? No, I've not watched it yet. Somebody suggested to me. I have actually watched the trailer of it, and it sounds horrific. It was all to do with the major steelworks in Corby, but when they did the land contamination cleanup, by the sound of it, they did quite poorly, and allowed all the toxic dust to float about, and it had pretty serious impacts in terms of birth defects and so on. So it's seemingly really good in terms of going through what happened, why it happened, how it happened, why it shouldn't have happened, all that sort of stuff. So I think if anybody's interested in that, just why we need to be careful about, managing contaminated land properly, managing hazardous waste properly, this is a pretty good example of how not to do it, I think.
How not to do it. Yeah,
I think Yeah, the bit I saw about it was very much, you know, why it's been kept almost so quiet. And nobody's really been that aware. It's not really got the publicity that maybe it should have deserved. Maybe by next episode we'll both have watched it.
But the thing with this is, though, the trouble with this is it gives that sort of the industry such a bad name when 90% of or 99% of people are doing the right thing or whatever. And then you've got this sort of incidents here. So it tarnishes just everything else.
I don't know the time scale, but from the pictures I saw, it was certainly 20 or 30 years old. So it's gone back to almost a different time scale when maybe the standards weren't quite as good or applied quite as tightly. But I think that's our homework, Jane, for next time. I think we need to, when you're sunning yourself in Dubai, you need to download Netflix and watch it.
Right, okay, I'll be watching
That's your homework.
Yes.
Depress yourself
and
on
also,
holiday.
Oh, do you know what? I'll be just in that sunshine. But anyway, I'll probably be looking for fly tipping incidents. I bet they don't have that many in Dubai, but there's a report just out for the year 2023-2024 from DEFRA. I mean, this is for local authorities in England, and it's identifying that it's increased by 6% from the previous year. And it's just, it's saying, according to the statistics, 688,000 fly tipping incidents involved household waste, which is a 5% increase on the previous year. The most common size category was equivalent to a small van load, followed by the equivalent of a car boot load or less.
It's just mental that there's so many fly tipping incidents. It's just, it's back to this real, people not wanting to take responsibility for their own waste they generate. It's just madness. And I think it's one of these ones, I think if you did address it properly, like consistently across the UK, you could have a really big impact. But that takes us on to a litter and a fly tipping rant, really, didn't it? Which we'll probably not want to go there, do we?
Well, do you know what? I was leaving the office today and I noticed what an awful mess the bypass is. The A77 down to Stranraer, just there where the roundabouts are. The amount of rubbish, and there's like people, there was people in there, picking up the rubbish, but they didn't look like council workers. They, didn't have any high vis. They just looked like volunteers. But it was just a mess. It really was. And that's just for littering.
It's just mad. My theory.
Windows.
My theory. Shut the motorway.
No.
Shut the motorway to pick litter. Shut the road. Put the big sign up to say we've shut the road because we're picking up your litter. If you want the road open again, then stop dropping your litter.
Stop throwing litter.
Make a point and create havoc, and then people might just start listening. But that's maybe, I don't know who's going to be brave enough to pick that one up, but never mind. Anyway, on a much more positive note, Jane, you found something from Glasgow's South Side Tool Library. So it looks like you can sign up for a club where you can borrow all sorts of tools. I was quite intrigued by this.
Yeah. Well, there's quite a few of them, to be honest. There's quite a few tool libraries around, and I'd seen a webinar that was advertised to say, let's show you how to make a library of things, and I thought, I'll have a look at that. And again, looked at Southside Tool Library inventory, and some of the stuff they've got is quite fascinating. You can get an angle grinder, carpet cleaner, circular saw, a folding e-bike, a grass trimmer, a cordless jigsaw, and that's the ones that cut things. A tent,
and a bike carrier. Stuff.
Yeah, absolutely fascinating how what you can. This kind of goes back to some extent. Yeah. But this goes out to some extent to Tony Burns, who we were chatting to the other week, with his clothes. The same sort of thing. You rent your clothes.
Well, it's I've got a shed full of tools that, half of them I use once a year if I'm lucky. So would it be better just joining this club for 30 quid and just nipping up and borrowing them out? So you can borrow it for 2 weeks, I think. So that gives me plenty of time to procrastinate and not do the job.
Like, you can donate your stuff that you don't use anymore and donate it to the tool library as well.
Fascinating. There we go. We'll share that link. Yeah. We'll share that link to the tool library. So And what we're on TikTok occasionally now, Jane. So we've got to do our makeup and make sure our background's on these days.
I know, we've got TikTok, and I tell you what, my son Lewis, I spoke to him the other day, and he says to me, "Mum, I've seen you on TikTok." And he was
There
very
you go.
shocked that, his mum was now a TikTok star. So we're on TikTok under albion.environmental. So we're on LinkedIn and Facebook with our Rubbish Talk accounts. So, just get on there and give us a like, give us a wave. I don't know, you don't do waves, but anything. Or queries, questions, get in
Brilliant.
touch.
We're doing a little search through our listener profile. So we now have 59 international listeners. So we're not quite sure if the 59 are holiday makers, as in our existing listeners going on holiday, or whether they are genuine international listeners. So if you are listening from a place out with the UK, then please get in touch with us at hello@rubbishtalk.uk and introduce yourself. We'd be delighted to hear from you.
And we're particularly keen at getting in touch with whoever's been to Vanuatu, which is,
No, that's a resident. That's a resident of Vanuatu, I'm sure.
do you reckon? Well, whoever's been or whoever lives in Vanuatu, which is east of New Guinea, southeast of Solomon Islands, and west of Fiji. Looks like it's kind of in the middle of obviously in the middle of the sea. But anybody who's from there, then give us a shout. It looks such a cool place.
And we have got listeners in the Falkland Islands, but we know who that is. We know that's I think it will be Craig Chandler and Debbie Horton, who does all the environmental work in the Falkland Islands. So there's maybe an idea for a future guest for us. Waste management in the Falkland Islands. So we'll need to reel her in. If you are listening from far away, then please get in touch. We'd be delighted to hear from you. And just the other stat that comes out is, so actually, a couple of stats is UK listenership is actually 90%, and the rest of the world makes up the other 10%. And interestingly, America is 3.4%. So maybe listeners from America are listening into Rubbish Talk for some common sense. That's maybe a bit political at the moment.
Yeah.
There we
I think
go.
that's about it, is it?
Yep, no, absolutely. So, as I said at the start, we had a great chat with Richard Coulson. So he's the chair of the Wood Recyclers Association. He's also, in his day job, is the Biomass Oil Procurement Manager for RWE Supply and Trading Company. So Richard's been chair of the Wood Recycling Organisation for almost 4 years. He's actually stepping down fairly soon, but a huge amount of knowledge about the wood sector and how important a part it plays in the overall recycling in the UK, just in terms of what they do, how they do it, and so on. And it's a fascinating part of the waste sector. So over to myself, Jane and Richard.
Hi, Richard, and welcome to Rubbish Talk. How are you today?
I'm good, thanks, Jane. Hi, Alistair.
Hi, Richard.
Yeah, good. So we're going to go through a number of questions. So we want to hear all about yourself, what you've been doing, and whether you consider yourself in the chair of the Wood Recyclers Association as part of the waste industry or more of a niche area. So the first one I'm going to ask you is, can you tell us about who you currently work for and a bit of background about the organisation, just to get some context into our later discussions?
Yeah, okay, so I wear two hats really for my main job, my day job. I work for a company called RWE, and RWE have been around for something like 125 years now, supplying households and industry with power across the world. And my role's in biomass fuel procurement there. I buy fuel for a combined heat and power plant, which we have in Markinch in Fife, Scotland, not too far from you maybe, Alistair.
It's fairly far, Richard.
Is it?
Yeah, it is.
It's probably about 2.5 3 years away, actually. But it's probably closer than you are, Richard, I think. I think that'd be
It
fair to
is
say.
much closer. But I don't think I'm here today to talk about that, but instead focus on my involvement with the Wood Recyclers Association, the WRA. I've been on the board of the WRA for 11 years now, and I just don't know where that time's gone. And then it'll be for the past 4 years. I've been lucky enough to act as the chair, which has been a great experience. Do you guys know much about the Wood Recyclers Association?
Not
You're going to tell
really.
us, Richard.
Yes, we're going to rely on you to inform us and all our listeners.
Yeah, so I can certainly give you a brief intro. So we were formed back in 2001 just by half a dozen of the founders. You may know some of the names, like Jeff Hadfield, Michael Tracy, David Lang, Jeff Hornsby.
Certainly not Michael Tracy.
Yeah,
Yes.
good. And they just basically wanted to form a collective voice for the industry. Yeah, they had some issues at the time. They thought the strength in numbers. And then fast forward today, and we've got over 120 members. And collectively we manage over 90% of the volumes of wood waste handled in the UK each year. Our membership's inclusive of that whole supply chain, which I think is really, really important. So we've got everyone from the actual waste producers through to the end users, such as the biomass industry, animal bedding, panel board manufacturers. We've got a lot of really supported service members in the middle, so the people who are supplying the machines, lab services, all that good stuff. But at the core, since day one, it's the reprocessors. It's the people who are actually receiving the waste and converting it into the product who are the core of the association. We've enjoyed reciprocal membership with the likes of the CIWM, the Wood Panel Industry Federation, BAV, who's basically our German counterparts, and Confor. And I just think, as I said before, that inclusivity I think is so important for a trade association. Yeah, every cog of the wheel's got to work to be successful. And I just think it's got us to where we are today. We're basically recognised as the respected voice for the industry, the regulators, the policy makers. If they want an opinion about wastewood, but they come to us.
So what type of products are you making, Richard, and where are you getting the waste wood from? Is this, I'm just wondering where your sort of sources are and where it goes in the end. What's the sort of process?
Okay, so each year, depending on the economic cycle, the UK produces around about 4.5 million tonnes of wood waste. So it might come from construction, demolition. It might come from the local civic amenity site. We'll all go along there at the weekend to dispose of our own furniture and the likes. The whole mixed sources. Our industries basically work with the grading system. So there's grades A, B, C and D. A's the most cleanest material. D's hazardous treated timber, which unfortunately we can't use. And what we're trying to do is encourage that the cleanest materials are recycled. Yeah, the carbon's locked up for another generation into the likes of chipboard. And then once the material reaches the end of its natural, useful life, it then heads off to energy recovery. And indeed, a lot of the biomass plants in the UK can also operate as CHP, combined heat and power.
There you go. And it's not, what you've described there, Richard, is not without its challenges in terms of some of the wood is potentially hazardous, so it's not an easy, like, I think the general public view wood's wood and it's fine, but the reality is it's not. Is it worth maybe talking through some of that?
Yeah, it can. I mean, it's for us, the grade D is the truly hazardous material. Yeah. So it's the likes of cooling tower timbers, telegraph poles, railway sleepers. It's a bit perverse that lots of us make our veg patches out of railway sleepers.
Let's contaminate them with oil and all sorts and then make a vegetable patch.
It's those materials which our members won't use. Unfortunately, they will have to go off to hazardous waste incineration. But the rest of the material, our members can put to good use.
Does that include like fences?
Before, Richard.
Yeah, do they include like fences, like domestic, fence in my back garden? Is that that has, I suppose it's treated wood, isn't it? So you wouldn't be interested in that then.
It's a type of timber treatment, but we've proved the association's worked really, really hard over the past 4 or 5 years. Our technical lead, Vicky Hughes, led the work with a project with the EA and the other regulators to actually prove. And we use science, we took hundreds and hundreds of samples of all types of different timber products, whether it's a fence, decking, cladding, and we use science to prove actually, no, there's very, very limited amounts of hazardous material. A lot of those treatments were actually banned. They went out of production years ago. The volumes are so de minimis, and they're actually entering out the supply chain not to be replaced. With what we do with biomass and the gatehouse protocols which panel board have, we can effectively, safely, compliantly manage that material.
Oh, that's good to know, because my fence fell down, so I've got nice to know it can be used for something.
I was going to say, you mentioned Vicky Hughes there, Richard, so a wee shout out to Vicky, because it was Vicky that put us together in terms of being able to get you on Rubbish Talk. So thank you to Vicky, and I know she's an avid listener, so a wee shout out to Vicky.
Well, no, as I said, it should be a big shout out to Vicky for all the work which she's done for the association, not just on wastewood classification, but, something that I'm proud of. Our sector, the WRA, was also the first material waste stream to have an approved FPP, fire prevention plan. Vicky put a lot of work into that.
And I'm still going back. My wee brain's whirring here with the waste management regulations around the reuse of sleepers to make garden and vegetable plots.
I'm not saying it's legislation, Alistair, but it informally happens.
Yeah.
I know, but that's what I'm thinking. It's one of these mad ones that I know you guys go through hell in making sure you've got to keep that material out your waste stream, and treat it as hazardous. And then fairly commonly we're using that type of material for things like vegetable plots and people's back gardens.
I suppose the slugs aren't going to go through that, are they?
It's maybe a slug prevention method.
I think that's the case. Absolutely.
I think that's what we've learned as an association, and what Vicky's certainly learned, and all the colleagues involved with it. A lot of our members feed in with sampling and knowledge. We just want risk-based and proportionate regulation. It's got to be sensible.
So does a lot of the wastewood, does it go into like panel boards and stuff like that? Is that where the main focus is, MDF or whatever you want to call it?
It won't be used. So recycled wastewood, really crudely speaking, we mentioned the UK produces around 4.5 million tonnes a year. A third of it's currently recycled, so about 1 million tonnes will go to panel board manufacturer, and then the rest to the likes of animal bedding. And then approximately 3 million tonnes, 2/3 goes towards energy recovery.
Right, okay, so that's kind of biomass side of it.
Okay. So tell us, Richard, what brought you into the world of, I'm going to say the world of waste management. You're probably going to say the world of material reuse or something. But
material wood.
What brought you into the world?
Yeah, so a real conscious decision for me at the time, and I've not regretted it. I can give you a potted history of me. I left uni. When did I leave uni? Quite mid-90s. I left uni with a degree in business, and I actually did a sandwich course. So half the role here in industry, half the role was sales, half it was purchasing, and that really cemented it for me. It was the purchasing route which I wanted to go down. At the same time, whilst I was in uni, I had a part-time job for beer money at a local department store, and really grateful to them. They allowed me to do lots of my project work in their buying offices. So when I graduated, summoned off to HR, thinking, what have I done? But they actually gave me my first career break. They offered me a role as a trainee buyer, and never looked back. It was a great experience. Met some really savvy people on both sides of the table, so it's learning on the job, but really, really enjoyed it. Then the world of waste came, if you want to say that loosely. I was ready for a change, so that's when I left to Kronospan in North Wales. I joined as a recycled fibre and sawmill co-products buyer. And it happened at a really, really interesting time. It's when the sector was taking off 20-something years ago. Significant investment was being made to increase the use of waste resources in the production of chipboard. So
was that not quite a bit culture shock, that change from industry? Was that a big change for you, or was it just buying? Was it? I don't mean just buying.
Generally,
was it just?
Yeah. So I'm a purchaser by trade and a member of the Chartered Institute Purchase and Supply, all that good stuff. It's just getting the principles right, the 4Ps, right product, right place, right price. Retail, I don't know, a retail buyer is actually more like a salesperson. I didn't want to do that. There's something quite satisfying actually being on a manufacturing site, and you can see the recycled fibres coming in over the weighbridge, and then the finished product, the raw, the building bits for somebody's kitchen, furniture, going out. That's quite satisfying to see.
Yeah.
Yeah, you see, this is what we have
So
in
I enjoyed my
common,
time there.
Richard worked about 2 miles down the road from where I lived. And what's advantage of the Kronospan factory? Next door to it is Cadbury's. So you've got chocolate. So if if you're at your lunchtime, you just go round to get some chocolate buttons and then come back again.
Is there still a factory shop? There used to be when I was brought up in Grangemouth, one of the bakeries used to have a factory shop where they sold all the semi-done products for a ridiculously cheap price.
I'm not sure. We were never invited to. If there was one, it was a well-kept secret.
You were never told about it, Richard.
Yeah, but it's just, as Jane said, a lovely part of the world. I lived in a little village called Glenceiriog at the bottom of the Llangollen Valley, and it's just a beautiful part of the world.
There you go. So do you view yourself as being in the waste sector, or do you view yourself being in the wood sector?
Power generation for the day job, for what I do for the WRA, yeah, I'd say we're one really successful waste stream within the waste sector.
Yep, good. So going back to your career, any sort of favourite roles or projects you had through that journey? Any you look back and think, oh, I'd love to do that again?
I've really enjoyed being chair of the WRA. It's a 4-year term. I won't be vanishing. Our articles allow me to stay on to support the new chair, Mark Hayton from Egger, so I look forward to that.
Oh, is that Mark from up here, from Egger Barony?
Yes, well, he'll buy products for both factories at Hexham and Barony. So I've worked with Mark for many years. We're both really passionate about the industry. We've still got a lot to deliver as the WRA. So I'm looking forward to working with Mark. I've mentioned some of the projects which we've successfully delivered. Vicky's stirred with the fire prevention protocol, wasteful classification. Can I just take a minute to put a thanks out to the wider team, because we've mentioned Vicky, but Julia Turner, she's our executive director. She's helped me and the WRA members each and every day. And then we've got Kylia, Erica, Rachel, who are managing our membership, comms, admin, really supportive to them all for the work they put into the association.
Do you think this is a bit of a side question, do you think there's organisations out there that should be members that are not members yet, that they're maybe handling wood waste and that they would benefit from membership, or do you think you've captured most of?
No, there obviously will be more. There's more waste producers. We've got most of the actual reprocessing members. Yeah. We're inclusive of all the panel board mills, all the major animal bedding. We've got quite a lot of biomass power generation on the books. we're always looking for new members.
Yeah. There you go. There's a
Everybody's
wee shout
always,
out for you.
yeah.
You know, what I've seen though is how I think however 20 odd years I've been involved in the sector, it's come a long way. It's progressed. The time I moved on from Kronospan to RWE, I don't know, it was the late noughties, and that was a really interesting time. That's when the initial renewables policy, the renewables application ROCs was being introduced, and that's basically built a fleet of biomass, regional biomass plant all around the country. What's next? What's on the horizon? Will it be new products like SAF? So, you know, the development will continue, I'm sure of it.
Yeah. Fascinating.
So you've kind
Good.
of given us a bit about your favourite roles and a shout out to everybody. What's the worst thing you've had to deal with, or any disasters, or any funny stories you want to tell us?
I think, like, listening to some of the old podcasts, I've got the same badge. I've had my fair share of stuck in the mud moments, losing my wellies, flat in the face in the mud, amusement. On a more serious side, I think one of the things which really frustrates me is the pace of legislative change. It's so slow. So, you know, there's a project we're working on now for our biomass members, moving from the RO, the ROC regime, which starts to phase out in a few years, to a future life with BECS. Actually trying to get the people who make the decisions, the policymakers on board, is so tediously slow. It's difficult to comprehend at times.
So what's that change? What is BECS? What's the? You were saying there's a swap.
Okay, I'm awful with acronyms. Sorry. So
You're not allowed to use acronyms here. You got to spell them out, Richard. So
yeah.
put you to the test and see if you know what it is.
Noted. So BECS is biomass with carbon capture storage. Yeah.
Ah, right.
So the likes of the CCC, the Climate Change Committee, have said that if our countries wants to meet its carbon reduction targets, which are coming along at a pace now, carbon capture storage technologies are really important. So the 50 odd biomass plants which are dotted around our country will actually start to fall out of support from the renewables obligation in a few years' time. They phase out. And what we're trying to advocate for is a transition. We want to move from life under the RO, the renewables obligation, and we want to retrofit BECS technology, carbon capture storage technology, to actually keep all the good that we deliver today. Collectively, we produce something like 5.5 terawatt hours of power. So that's enough. To put that into perspective, it's enough power 1.5 million households, yeah? So we want to keep all that good, but we also want to improve. So the way we operate today, we've modelled in 2023 that our assets, compared to our country's marginal fleet, we save 700,000 tonnes of carbon. If we actually retrofit them with BECS, that figure increases to just over 3.5 million tonnes. So that's something like 16% of our country's target for 2035.
That's a lot.
That's pretty impressive, Richard.
I'm going to ask a really silly question, or a daft question, but how would you retrofit for carbon capture? What sort of methods would you use? Or is that too simple,
I'm
too
not
complicated
an
a
engineer,
question?
Jane. But
That's a perfect answer, Richard.
basically, the gases are fed through an amine solution which captures the carbon, and from that it can be transported and then locked up into long-term storage.
Yeah. I'm swinging back to something you said right at the start of the episode there, Richard, that most of these plants are combined heat and power. Did I pick that up right?
Not most of them.
Some of them.
I mean, the plant I buy for up at Markinch, that's CHP. It's got a district in Maine. There's the likes of Stevenscroft in Lockerbie, who'll supply steam to the sawmill next door.
Yeah.
Plant in Sheffield, Blackbear Meadows, because connected to the district heating scheme. So lots of us are. And there's no reason why more of us can't if those, people are prepared to sign up for the heat offtake.
Yep. Yep.
Is there a
Okay.
lot of
No, that's good.
I'm thinking of, you get crops and willow crops and stuff like that that are grown for biomass. Do you get a lot of that as well? I mean, we were talking waste wood, but I'm just wondering about, specific biomass crops. Is that still a big source of fuel into the biomass plants, or not?
So if you look at some of our members, that figure I mentioned before, the 5.4 terawatt hours, 4 odd terawatts of that comes from waste wood fuel alone, 3 million tonnes, yeah?
Yeah.
The assets also run on alternative fuels. They've got the capacity to handle about another 1.5 million tonnes of things like poultry litter, the fibre for an anaerobic digestion, forestry residues. So there's all sorts of domestic biomass which our members use. I think some of the issue, we talked about the pace of change before. I think part of the problem is people's perception, and stakeholders on all front, whether it's the public or the actual policymakers. When you say the word biomass, what do they think of? It's imported pellets into 1 or 2 really quite large units in our country. Our members are taking our own domestic waste resources, stuff which is produced 24/7. It needs to be compliantly managed. We do that. It's not just the base load power we're delivering, which is low carbon. We're also providing that really important environmental service which sets us aside from other forms of biomass.
And
Okay.
it's
Yeah.
quite fascinating how these plants have developed and the market has developed with them. Because I remember that one going in at Lockerbie, and it was, how are we going to be able to feed it? How are we going to be able to get enough fuel for it effectively?
Yeah.
And they've clearly managed. And I know right at the start they were ripping up tree stumps and forest biomass and stuff to try and fuel it. And I think to a certain extent they still do that, but it's viable to pull it off the hillside.
But there's forestry residues, There's brash. If you think about a tree, there's a chunk of it under the ground, the roots.
Yep.
That can't go through a sawmill, yeah? Branches, they can be left to age. The needles drop off. It becomes a fuel. The very top of the tree, the really small dimension stuff, crooked timber, diseased timber. We actually provide a service to the forestry industry too.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's quite a wide variety of inputs, isn't there?
There is, one of the things we want to do. So I think I said at the start, our WRA membership, we're really inclusive, from the waste producer to the people who are doing it in the middle to the final end users. I read somewhere a wee while ago that the UK is the 3rd largest importer of timber globally. So one of the things that I would like to do, and we are starting to do, is work more with the likes of our colleagues in Confor to actually start growing more of our own domestic commercial forestry, The UK's got a fantastic record for sustainability and managing our forests. We can use that product, in low carbon timber products to displace higher carbon building products. And then once those materials have been through life, they can come to WRA members because we're good at what we do. We can do more.
Yeah. My brother-in-law is actually one of the directors of Scottish Woodlands, which is one of the big harvesting companies in Scotland. And their biggest challenge is basically harvesting enough timber. They just can't get, there's so much forest in Scotland that's mature, ready for harvest, and it's just that getting the people and the manpower and the equipment to get it harvested. And they've obviously got environmental restrictions of when they can do it and what size area they can do and all the rest, and that's their biggest challenge. It's not that we've got a shortage of wood, it's that we can't harvest it quick enough.
Yeah, I mean, there might be specific resource issues, but I think we're not, if we're the 3rd largest importer globally, that says to me our own domestic markets are short, we can do more. DEFRA has got a plan to plant more trees, we need to get on and do it, because a tree takes about 40 years to mature before you can use it.
Yeah, yeah. So tell me, do you think your role has changed your opinions and habits out with the workplace? Are you totally wood focused, or do you see the bigger picture in terms of waste management and some of the changes that are going on at the moment?
I live in a crazy house. I've got 3 teenage sons and 2 teenage stepdaughters, so
My goodness.
their
That
ability.
sounds a joy, Richard.
That's why I've got no hair. Their ability to turn on every electrical appliance and light switch at once is absolutely phenomenal. We will have the conversation, and it's dad's going on again, but actually just take an extra couple of minutes to make sure you put the right recycling in the right box, because it is going to make somebody's life so much more easier, yeah, and a process so more efficient, yeah. Trying to educate them's a battle in itself.
Good luck with that
imagine.
one.
I can imagine. And how do you relax and get away from the work? How do you escape? Or do you
It's
escape?
outside for me. I love being outside, and we're so fortunate where we live. Within, I don't know, 10 minutes, we can be up in Delamere Forest, the surrounding woodland. So really enjoy that. And once we get there, get off the track, actually go and walk in the forest. I've always enjoyed walking. Made a point for as long as I can remember with my boys. We'll go up into the Highlands each year. We'll have 1 year West Coast, 1 year East Coast. So we've bagged a fair few of the peaks now. Talking about walking, can I be cheeky for a moment, please?
Of course you can.
Again.
Goes without saying. So a colleague and I have just recently signed up for the Alzheimer's Trek 26 challenge. I think it's in July. We're going to do a 26-mile sponsored walk around the North Yorks Moors. So would it be all right if I sent you a link to?
I'm sure we can share the link. We can share the
Absolutely.
link in
Yeah.
the newsletter that goes out with the podcast. I did spot that when I was flicking through your LinkedIn profile, actually. So how far did you say? 26 miles.
Yeah, so it's a fair walk, but in a lovely part of the world.
That's a long
Sounds-
walk. We did the kilt walk about
And your
2
James
or
James
3
still
years
scarred
ago.
from doing the
I
kill
am
walk last
still. I
year.
was 14 miles, right? I never walked that far in my tough before, and I tell you, my toenails dropped off, my hips were sore. I was like, never again. I'm not walking.
Oh,
No. I'll cycle. I'll cycle, but no. So good luck with that one, and hope you get lots of money
thank
for
you.
for
Are
Alzheimer's.
you a walker or a runner, Alistair?
I do have a wee bit of running.
There's a lot of
I do
running.
a wee bit of running, but I like to go out in the hills. But sometimes my running goes a wee bit too far, and it's quite long runs. It's,
26 miles for Alistair is just like a walk in the park. He's normally on hundreds of
This
miles.
it might be a bit too short for you. The really favourite route we found last year was to go up Ben McDewey, and then instead of coming straight back down, go around the back to Cairngorm, and that.
I know exactly the route you mean, because I've been up it a few times recently.
It's nice.
No, it's cracking part of the world.
And then
Yes.
I think that, so yeah, being outside, and then the other thing I love is live music. So whether it's a local pub with cover bands or actually going to some concerts, I just so enjoy that atmosphere.
I tell you where I went last night. I went to the concert hall in Glasgow to see Mike and the Mechanics. And a friend of mine, she had a ticket, and she said, "Do you want to come?" I went, yeah, that's fine. And it's like total blast from the past. So not only was it Mike and the Mechanics, but it was Genesis songs as well. And the guy on the drums was Phil Collins' son. How cool was that?
Wow,
There you go.
brilliant.
So anyway, right. So back to the questions. So we've talked quite a bit about your current role with the Wood Recyclers Association, but where do you see what do you see yourself trying to achieve through that? You've got your chair and going forward. What's your sort of ultimate goal, and what's next for you in your career. And, so you're still young there, Richard. So, you've still got quite a while ahead of you.
Thanks, Jay. I mean, I really enjoy my day job. Really enjoy working for RWE. For the WRA, I think I've mentioned it, to be honest. So we've got a lot to deliver on our biomass advocacy work, but that wider piece, working with the rest of the entire timber supply chain, right from the nursery, the forest, all the way down to what our WRA members do, I would like to try and push that. I think it's the right thing to do. It'll have a really positive carbon impact. It'll deliver many more. You talked about jobs before, Alistair. It'll give so many more job opportunities in places which really need those opportunities. There's no bad in it along the supply chain.
Is there any fact you'd like to share from your sector that people might not know? I think we've had quite a few.
So we're putting together our 2024 industry statistics, but if you look at what we did in 2023, I don't know if I mentioned this before, we actually achieved 97% material usage. So from the 4.5 million tonnes that the country produces each year, we made good use of 4.4 million tonnes of that resource. And I think that's, pretty good thing.
That's a pretty impressive figure, actually, Richard. That's pretty impressive. Well done.
Thank you.
Okay, we always ask all our guests for their favourite piece of slang or dialect. So you must have some from your part of the world. There must be a Welsh one coming out here.
Well, I'll tell you one which always makes me laugh. The Welsh slang for microwave, ping de pong. That makes me laugh. Some expressions, things like old-fashioned ones, work hard, play hard. I think that's a good mantra for life. The kids have certainly got the second part of it. The first part of progress.
Maybe not the first bit.
No. We talked about music, song lyrics are some which stick with you. And, that's, some people write a song to express something that's happened in their life. I like bands like First Aid Kit and the song My Silver Lining, where it just basically says you got to keep on keeping on. I heard Paloma Faith's version of you got to make your own kind of music on the radio the other day, which I remember my mum and dad playing from years ago. But what is it? You got to make your own kind of music, so set out where you're gonna go and sing your own special song. I think from the industry, the one which sticks with us the most, and it's unfortunately from a colleague who was involved in a fatal accident a year or two back, is just do the right thing. If we all followed that principle, it'd make life tick along a bit more easily.
Yeah.
I think without bringing politics into the equation, I think what's happened in America, that's a good one for the moment, Richard.
It rings true for most things in life, whether it's professional or personal.
Absolutely. And in the big bad world of wood waste recycling, if you had a magic wand, what would you like to use it for? Where's the big thing you would like to say? Let's get this sorted. Is it carbon capture or is it something else?
Yeah, I've talked about that, and it's important we get that sorted, because if we don't, we're actually going to create more issues. But for me, it's segregation. Yeah. So that's really, really important, that we try and educate the waste producers now that the cleanest materials, it goes back to what I said with the kids before, the cleanest wood, that's got to go to a recycling outlet first, panel board. If it's cleaner, it's easier to recycle, it's more efficient, there's less waste, it just makes sense all around. Lock that carbon up for another product cycle, and then once it's done, we can recover its energy with carbon capture.
How do you do that, Richard? Because I think my theory with this, and this is part of the reason we set up the podcast, is waste producers that handle wood will probably understand that segregation message and they'll train their staff accordingly. But how the hell do we tell the public? To the public, about wood's about wood. So how do we, I always think we're very good at messaging to the waste industry, but we're not very good at messaging to the big bad world out there. How do we change that?
It's, interesting point. So I think there's work to do on both fronts. For the public, it comes down to the local HRWC, and a lot of them are quite small, and unfortunately you can't have a skip for everything. So I know at some of the larger ones they've got one for the cleaner solid wood and one for the do the correct segregation. For businesses, there's still a lot of improvement there. So some of it, no doubt, is space, but some of it will be commercially driven. And human nature, some of it, I think, is just laziness. Take a bit of extra time to do the right thing.
There we go. Do the right thing. And finally, what advice would you give to the younger generation coming into the sector? If they see you and think, yeah, I want to do what Richard's doing, how would you advise them to go about that?
There's just so many opportunities, just grasp them. And, I've talked about me purchasing, but there's roles, whether you want to be in operations, marketing, sales, legal, IT, there's a role for everybody. We need those skills. And I really enjoy the industry, It's a fairly small, very friendly goldfish bowl. It's a good place to work. And then don't be afraid to make mistakes, yeah? That's how I think it was Einstein who said, I haven't made a mistake. I found another way of not doing it. Correct? Yeah.
I do all that. I do that all the time, Richard.
Yeah.
I'm brilliant at it.
There we go. That was brilliant, Richard. That was really good. You're the first person, as I said, right. I think before we started recording, we had been meaning to get somebody on about the wood recycling for a long time. When we first set up the podcast, we did have high ambitions of getting somebody from every different sector, and then over time, it's taken us quite a while to get around everybody. And there's still definitely sectors we've not covered yet. So really good to get somebody like yourself on from the wood sector, and quite happy to, any links you've got to your association or your charity walk and stuff, we'll quite happily share these links to our listeners and our network.
I really appreciate that. Thank you for the opportunity. It's been fun.
Well, thank you very much.